Going through COVID-19 reports can feel like you're swimming through a sea of new positive cases, average ages, age groups, residents, non-residents, total cases, and the death rates. You can get lost in the numbers if you don't know what to look for. There's one piece of information experts say we should be thinking about every day: the percent of positive cases. That helps us understand if we're doing enough testing and how an overall community is responding to the pandemic. If we see a consistent rise in the percentage of positive cases, then we know more people on average are being infected. You can't just take the percent positive at face value, though. Dr. Jill Roberts with the USF College of Public Health says it's more complex than that.
So the problem with percent positive is it varies due to how much testing you do. So you cannot compare percent positive from one day to the next unless the number of tests is the same.
You can't compare a day with high testing to a day with low testing. That won't give you an accurate picture of how the virus is spreading. Dr. Juan Demois from Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital says a misconception about the percent of positive cases is that as we do more testing, the number will automatically go up.
That is not true at all. The raising of the percent positive in a community means that there is more virus infecting more people.
Think about it like apples. If we looked at 10 apples and found worms in 6, 60% were infected. But if we looked at 50 apples and still only found 6 with worms, that number changes to 12%. If it was 100 apples and still only 6 had worms, 6% infected. So to really know what the percent of positive cases is, we have to be doing as much testing as possible.
We love to watch light streak across the night sky, don't we? And we've come up with some pretty creative names to describe what we see. Shooting stars, a falling star, you might have even heard us say a fireball. Those names aren't exactly accurate, though. Shooting stars are anything burning up from the friction of the atmosphere as it races toward Earth. This could be man-made or something actually from space. If it's from space, it's called a meteoroid, any sort of small rocky or metallic debris traveling in outer space. When a meteoroid enters the atmosphere, we call it a meteor. It picks up speed falling through the Earth's atmosphere and burns off material. The fire it makes is what we see streak across the sky as it falls. According to NASA, on any given night, you could see several meteors per hour from anywhere on Earth. A meteor shower is when there is a window of time when the frequency of meteors increases. If the meteor survives the trip through the atmosphere, that's when we call it a meteorite. NASA estimates about 48.5 tons of meteoritic material fall on Earth every day.
The cry was first put out in 2012 when an unarmed black teen, Trayvon Martin, was shot and killed. The cry went viral and a movement was sparked when George Zimmerman was acquitted after shooting and killing Trayvon. 2 years later, Ferguson, Michael Brown was shot 6 times by police and he was unarmed. Now this turned the spark of Black Lives Matter into a flame, igniting protests and rage across the nation and bringing awareness that blacks aren't being treated equally. This is where the response to our plea and mission was born, a phrase that says, all lives matter. All right, let's be clear. This response is not a show of solidarity, but rather more racism and oblivion to the movement. Is it a lack of empathy and shows a person is blind of the innocent lives lost, for the families broken by injustice, and for the young black boys and black girls who are watching our words and actions? Do all lives matter? Of course they do. Of course they do. But if all lives matter, why does the NAACP say black Americans are 5 times more likely to get arrested? Doesn't seem like all lives see justice in this area, right? And if all lives matter, why does a study from Harvard say that black employees are less likely to get outstanding promotions at work than white employees? If all lives matter, why does the Pew Research Center say black households have only 10 cents in wealth for every dollar held by white households? If all lives matter, why do people stop me in stores asking if I work here or give me threatening looks when I eat at a nice restaurant or stay at a fancy hotel just being myself? These are the cries of voices trying to be heard. Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, ignores the deep-rooted racial divide we have in this country at this moment. Dismissing Black Lives Matter means you have the privilege to ignore the problem. Myself and the other 47.8 million African Americans in this country don't get that privilege. That's why Black Lives Matter.
When the game stopped and the courts were emptied, no one knew when or if professional sports were going to come back. Then the NBA had an interesting idea. Separate your players completely and the teams from the rest of the world. Basically create a sports bubble. It was an experiment, and so far it's paid off. So how exactly does this bubble work? Well, there are a lot of procedures in place to make sure the bubble doesn't burst. In the NBA's case, there are 132 pages of safeguards. Dr. Jason Wilson from Tampa General says this plan wasn't just thrown together overnight.
The NBA's actually had quite a bit of thought process behind this in terms of the lead-in. You got to make sure that people are sort of pre-screened, that people come into the bubble essentially viral-free.
So first you need an environment where the virus doesn't exist. That means before coming in, every person had to isolate for several days and get 2 negative tests. Once inside the bubble, though, life isn't that normal. Dr. Wilson says you still need to have the best public health initiatives in place, and there still needs to be social distancing, regular testing, limited movement, and different phases. So even if you've created a world where people aren't testing positive for the disease, you still need preemptive measures because the virus is going to try and get in.
If there's not high transmission going on between people, there's not much the virus can do, right? It relies on us to transmit the virus and to help the virus reproduce and propagate it and make more virus. And if we're not helping the virus do that, then the virus has no business being there.
The bubble idea is working in the NBA so far, but could we apply it to towns or even whole states?
Here's the simple truth is I don't know if it'll work, and we don't know if it's going to work because we haven't done this really before.
One of the big differences Dr. Wilson pointed out was the NBA has created an environment without social stress. Players don't need to leave the bubble for food or work. It's all provided. And it would be tough to create that scenario in a community.